All right, welcome back to the Comic Watchers. It's a special episode 229. I am here with Alex Paknadel, who will be is going to be. We're going to be talking some X Men here. But before we get into that, how about you tell us again? I know you've been on the show before and stuff like that, but kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and your comic book reading history.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, I'm Alex. Hello. Um, uh, I'm a writer from England. You might be able to tell from the silly accent. Um, uh, in terms of my sort of comic book secret origin, I guess I'm kind of second generation. My dad basically taught me to read with Marvel Treasury editions, so I was kind of doomed. Um, yeah, always had an interest. Decided very early on. I think when like X-Men 1 came out in like 91, and I was very young at the time, and I made it my kind of life goal that I was going to kind of beat Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter I think started writing like Legion when he was 13. I thought, well, I'm going to do it at 12. And I think like I overshot by about 20 years, but like I got there eventually. Um, I've been doing a little bit for Marvel now for like the last 4 years. Did started out doing some tie-ins to the Empire miniseries. Thanks to Al Ewing, I did the Celestial Messiah one shot, the Swordsman one shot, both of which were quite well received. Then did an Immortal Hulk one shot, which was pretty well received. Which was sort of it was the story of the first Hulk, like the Stone Age Hulk. So or the yeah, so that was, and then I followed that up with a 10 issue run on Red Goblin last year, which I did kind of over in the sort of spider and symbiote end of things. And yeah, I've managed to kind of blag my way into the X office, and sort of very happy to be sort of part of this relaunch.
Yeah, so it's from we're in the from the ashes era now, and Krakoa is over, and so
So
I- so kind of give us an overview of what you're going to be writing the Sentinels, and it's a 5 issue limited series. Kind of give us like an overview of what the series will be about.
okay, well, it's the idea is it's a little bit different from what's come before. I mean, I'm sure anyone kind of familiar with the books and everyone familiar with the cartoon, Sentinels, big giant stompy murder bots. Um, I mean, there are variants as well. And I suppose the ones that are sort of closer to ours are kind of prime Sentinels. So they're human, and they've basically had nanotech infusions that give them various kind of mutant hunting abilities. The difference with these is they're not using the Prime Sentinel platform. They're using another platform that was developed by Lawrence Trask, who was resurrected on Krakoa.
Mhm.
And it's in quite a sort of I think it occupies quite a sort of interesting space, sort of relative to the sort of Krakoan end of things, because the conclusion that Lawrence came to is that basically now that mutants are back in the world, the and this is his view, not my view. Bad mutants need to be policed, and the best way to
Mhm.
police them is basically the only way he knows how, which is through Sentinels.
Mhm.
So he's running the Sentinel program out of Grey Malkin prison, which means that we basically have a lot of sort of shared DNA with Uncanny X-Men. So we're basically sort of occupying the same location and also a lot of the same sort of tropes as Gale and David's book. Um, and but what's interesting about that situation is that because Lawrence is a mutant, uh, Dr. Ellis, who runs Grey Malkin prison, really doesn't like mutants, and especially really doesn't like the idea of having a kind of US Marshal program to sort of apprehend rogue mutants being run out of her prison, especially if it's being run by a mutant. So there's all sorts of conflicts going on there, and the team themselves have all these sort of internal conflicts going on. It's all very X Men, um, and it's one of those things where it's kind of yes, yes, they're the bad guys, but the sort of, I suppose, the sort of overarching question is, do they know they're the bad guys?
Mhm. So, who are the main protagonists within the series?
Well, the main protagonists are the team themselves. So you have your four core Sentinel groups. So you have uh, Lockstep, Drumfire, Voivod, and Sawtooth, and they're all ex-military. I can't give too much away in terms of sort of
No,
how they
definitely.
kind of came to sort of be sort of inducted into the program, but they all have their own reasons. None of which crucially are to sort of do with kind of like active mutant hatred. I very much wanted it to be. They have very kind of human and banal reasons for kind of joining the program, and they don't necessarily they're not necessarily kind of privy to the sort of politics sort of underpinning it. So they're a group, and as far as they're concerned, they're doing their job, and they're doing their job well. But throughout the miniseries, some things are going to happen that are going to kind of throw some they're going to throw some obstacles, throw some curveballs their way, and I guess I'll leave it at that.
And will this be kind of? I know it's part of the From the Ashes. Will it be interacting with any other of the series that are currently, the new series that are out there, directly, indirectly?
Maybe. Maybe. No, I mean, indirectly. I mean, we literally are. So Gail's book is sort of referring to there's Grey Malk in prison, which is where a lot of kind of rogue mutants are being kind of held, and the idea is that it's basically it's my team that are getting them and bringing them to the
Mhm.
prison. Like I said, like they're sort of like U.S. Marshals. They kind of go out and get the prisoners, bring them to the prison, and then once they're in the prison, that's them. They wash their hands of them. So it shares, I'd say, a lot of DNA with Uncanny, and Gail and David have been incredibly gracious in terms of kind of sharing resources and sharing designs and everything, so it can kind of feel of a piece.
Mhm.
Um, and in terms of other books, I mean, yeah, I couldn't possibly say.
Okay. So, will we be seeing any? Will we be seeing any of the X-Men pop in and out, or just it's going to be mainly the Sentinels themselves?
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't give too much away. I mean, I
Sure.
can say just because it's been in the sort of solicitations. I mean, I want every issue to be, we're structuring it that like every issue is basically a mission,
Hmm.
because we wanted to sort of return to that kind of it's soap operatic in the sense that it's got threads that continue from issue to issue, but they're also largely kind of done in one. So, like the first issue is basically target Omega Red. So the first issue, they're trying to apprehend Omega Red, which it's Omega Red that goes about as well as can be expected. And issue two, because that's already been in the solicits, is going to be Sebastian Shaw. Um, both heavy hitters, both extremely nasty. Um, both, I mean, Omega Red, I think in particular, I mean, I think, a lot's been done to kind of humanize Arkady Rosevich in the last sort of few years. And I was very, very keen to kind of preserve that whilst also kind of keeping him as a very sort of formidable threat. It's interesting, sort of, just kind of uh, trying to sort of thread that needle in terms of preserving the things that people loved about the kind of Krakoan era, but also very much kind of acknowledging that these people are kind of back in the world in a different context, in a much more threatening context, I think,
Hmm.
because all of a sudden mutants have been kind of reintroduced back into the world. And to be honest, I mean, I'm doing another X book actually, which is I'm doing the From the Ashes digital first book. So I'm
I was
doing that
just getting
over
ready
on.
to ask you about that.
Well, like, I mean, the pitch that I gave, when they approached me to do it, the thing that I said was, the subtitle, as far as I'm concerned, is Homecomings. Every story that I've done in From the Ashes has been about I mean, that's something that I find kind of fascinating, is about a kind of uh, a group that did have a homeland, which is suddenly kind of violently returned to sort of being a diasporic culture, um, and how well or otherwise they adjust to that. Because I mean that just fascinates me as a human being, right?
Hmm.
On a sort of on a sort of character level. So I'm trying to sort of cover that as well within sort of I can't do as much because it's a team book. There's finite real estate. I can't lean into it quite as heavily, but I'm certainly I'm trying to kind of nod to it in Sentinels as well.
So tell me about the artist you're working with on Sentinels and on the Infinity comic.
Well, the artist that I'm working with on Sentinels is Justin Mason, who I think people will probably know from Spider-Punk. And Justin, like, I love Justin's work. I mean, it's got that kind of. I mean, it's unfair to draw comparisons with other artists, so please do take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, he is very, very much his own artist, but I would say he has that kind of that sort of Daniel Warren Johnson sort of kineticism. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's which really helps me because I'm much more comfortable with drama than I am with action. So when I kind of block out an action scene, it's bliss for me because I can kind of hand it over to Justin, and I know that I'm going to get the most kind of bone crunching and sort of adrenaline soaked version of that action scene back, right? Even if it means he doesn't go off script. He just makes whatever I've given him work, but he makes it work in the most um, in the most kind of pure comics way imaginable, right? I mean, I remember. I mean, Declan Shalvey's a good friend of mine, and I mean, when we were talking, when he was mentioning to me that he was kind of taking a Mystique, and I said, "Oh yeah, we got Justin," because I wasn't familiar with Justin's work, and he was so kind of excited, kind of on that basis. Like, I mean, he absolutely kind of like he just worships Justin, right? And
Hmm.
so that I was working with Justin, he was like, "Man, that is absolutely a match made in heaven. You're going to complement each other really beautifully." And I think we have. He's got. And I think what's interesting is, if you take sort of Mystique and Sentinel, um, I think they're going to form this sort of quite sort of fun, sort of scrappy corner of From the Ashes. The much kind of you've got the kind of the glossier books, and
Hmm.
so they're much kind of wider. They're wider in scope, I would say, and they um, you know, um, much I suppose sort of dealing with those sort of themes of reintegration sort of much more kind of deeply than we are because we're sort of nibbling at it from sort of different ends of things.
Hmm.
But I think we're this sort of scrappy, we're this sort of scrappy little corner, and we're having a lot of fun with that. But yeah, Justin's work is absolutely stunning. And over on From the Ashes, at the moment it's kind of it's a two-hander. So there's Diogenes Neves, who I've worked with before on a Spider-Man one shot, the Darkhold one shot that seemed to give everybody nightmares. I was very happy about that. And also Philip Seavey, both of whom are doing just a spectacular job. At the moment, I mean, I don't know. I think we're going out live, but at the moment, I'm the Omega Red story that I'm doing, which actually the Omega Red story I'm doing at the moment serves as a prologue to Sentinels #1. So if you read the Omega Red story in
Hmm.
X-Men Limited right now, you will basically you don't need to read it to read Sentinels 1, but you're going to have more context for what's going on in Sentinels 1 if you read this Omega Red story over in Unlimited, and that's with Philip. And yeah, he's just doing a spectacular job. Just really beautiful. It's like I think both with Dio and Philip, they accept kind of the limitations of the screen, but what they do kind of formally, which I can't really script for, is just sort of arranging it in that kind of vertical scroll to kind of give it a sense of scope that obviously you can't necessarily, you can't do wide panels, right, on
Hmm.
mobile. So what they're doing is they're just really sort of making the most of the real estate and doing a lot of the kind of I would say kind of a lot of the kind of choreography that I can't do in my head. They're kind of working out. They're doing that maths on the page, if you like. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it's a real kind of trust fall, but it's one I think that's kind of really paying dividends.
Now, is this your first time writing in the Infinity comic vertical scrolling format? And
No, I actually I did some X-Men Unlimited during the Krakoan era. I did a Cypher three-parter, and I think I did a Maggot five or six-parter, and I did a kind of one-shot, which was really fun, which was about the kind of the first mutant visitor to Krakoa, who basically like siphons geo energy, basically. So he basically doesn't know that he's eating Krakoa at the same time that Krakoa is trying to eat him. Um, so I did, and that was just a sort of like as a Halloween kind of one shot thing. So I'd done three stories in the unlimited
Mhm.
format before, but what I wasn't doing is I wasn't doing it as a solo book. So because I had a little bit more lead time, I approached it more as a kind of formal exercise. I was kind of thinking in terms of, okay, well, I can have this character kind of throw something to a character, and it kind of, you scroll down and then they catch it at a panel. But this has been such a kind of, it's so kind of breakneck doing it on a sort of weekly basis. I suppose it's more like kind of 2000 AD. It's much more kind of
Mhm.
breakneck. So I've had to, and which I think, and by the way, I mean, I think I'm learning all the time, but I've had to kind of lean more into kind of drama than kind of formalism, which I think can only kind of help you as a writer. I think it kind of makes me a bit more rounded.
As you're working with the characters in Sentinels, are you becoming, is one sticking out as your favorite?
Um, Interesting question. I mean, the thing is, I'm such a kind of ex nerd. Um, I'll be honest. I mean, I have my characters that I'm enjoying writing them all, but the thrill is really kind of getting to grips with the targets, right? So like, I mean, I absolutely adore Omega Red, always have, since I started reading comics, basically. So that was the kind of charge there, and kind of Sebastian Shaw is just this kind of pardon my but like just a fabulous bastard. So getting to write Sebastian Shaw is always fun because you get to kind of twirl a little bit of a moustache. Getting the oh, I won't say villains because I don't think of them as villains, but the antagonists I think are the most fun. You know.
So when you're writing um, for the Infinity comic, is there anything that you have to do different from when, say, you're writing Sentinels and thinking in the vertical format?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't really think about in terms of page turns, right? So a page turn is a potential surprise. Every page turn is a potential surprise. But every scroll, right? That break is any way you want it to be. So, if you want to do a surprise on panel 4, you can. If you want to do a panel surprise on panel 7, you can. So you're not kind of bound by page turns in the same way. But that also makes the pacing a lot more kind of arbitrary because I mean, there's just kind of sorry, I'm just casting around for a comic, but like, there's something about the kind of the physical limitations of the comic itself that kind of allows you to kind of go, okay, well that break should probably go there. That kind of that act break should probably go there, and it's very much kind of defined by the sort of the physical limitations of the object. And when you don't have that anymore, you have to be a little bit more kind of forensic about it. So, if I'm doing a vertical comic, I have probably a maximum of 35 panels to play with.
Hmm.
And sort of, I have to kind of break that down. So I'll probably sort of go, okay, so a page is roughly 5 panels. So, okay, so 35. So I've got probably the equivalent of 7 pages to play with and just try and sort of break it down in that sense.
Okay. So, what are your, say, top three X-Men stories? Favorite?
Oh, come on. Um, Come on. Um, all right. Okay. Actually, I think it's probably quite easy. Like E for Extinction. Come on. Um, can I do solo stuff as well?
Sure.
So yeah, E for Extinction, Weapon X, and Magneto Testament. And I didn't really need to hesitate because they're absolutely, yeah. They're for me they're just astonishing. And of the three, I'd probably put Weapon X at the top.
And is that the same way? Does that list, include your like favorite X-Men writers besides yourself being at the top?
Um, Favorite X writers? No, I think it'd be slightly different. Morrison, obviously. Um, I mean, it's tricky because I mean, I would say Barry Windsor Smith just because Weapon X, I think, is like I think I mean, like Weapon X and Born Again, I think are both kind of credible contenders for kind of best Marvel comics ever
Mhm.
made. I think there's an argument, but I think I struggle to sort of say, is BWS the greatest X-Men writer because made a profound impact. But I mean, how many issues of Marvel Comics Presents was that? Was it sort of 6 or 7? I mean, it wasn't a huge number.
Mhm.
And I wonder whether kind of I wonder whether sort of duration has to be a factor because if you're talking about sort of I mean, and then but you always kind of forget who's actually kind of passed through the door, right? I mean, Fraction, Gillen, Aaron, the best people have done X runs. So yeah, it's real tricky. I mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, Morrison, obviously, Claremont, obviously. Um, oh, come on. Um, yeah, I mean, you know what? Hickman. I
Okay.
know I'm not reinventing the wheel, but come on.
So, is there anything like an overall theme that you would like, readers to take away from the Sentinel series, other than just, a good story and another corner of the new era that Marvel's mutants find themselves in?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose um the thing I'd like people to walk away from it at least thinking about, not necessarily with a resolution. I'm not here to provide resolutions. I don't think it's the job of fiction to put a nice, neat little bow on anything. But I think it's uh something to it's certainly around what I'm sort of circling around, I think, is, something to do with the expectation that people will behave like machines. And
Hmm.
if we expect people to behave like machines, we probably shouldn't be surprised when they behave like machines. I mean, that's as far as I'll go without kind of really getting into the nuts and bolts of how it kind of resolves.
Hmm.
But I think it's like I think of my Sentinel team as they're people who are doing bad things. I also think of them as victims.
Okay. Um, so, is there anything else maybe about either the Sentinels or your Infinity comics that you wanted to mention that maybe we haven't covered?
I mean, other than I think they're quite good, I'd appreciate it if people checked them out. Not a huge amount. Um, I think I've sort of set the stall kind of as comprehensively as I'm allowed to without a big sort of shepherd's crook kind of coming in and yanking me off.
Yeah.
I've said about as much as I can. I mean, all I will say, is I know, from the hours that the editors are putting in, the hours that Justin's putting in, the hours that I'm putting in, everyone's giving this 100%. Nobody's kind of leaving anything on the table. It's very much it's a labor of love, and
Hmm.
I think that kind of shows on the page. It drops, I think, October 9th. And hope everyone checks it out. And I'm on Twitter. I'm at Alex Paknadel. And I'm obviously very eager to kind of hear what everyone thinks. Good and bad.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people.
And I know the last time we talked, it was during the Kickstarter for the Cult of the Lamb. How, how is that kind of wrapping up? Are you still working on that, or any updates you
I'm
can give
done.
on that?
I'm done. That's issue 4. Issue 4 locked. and obviously we were kind of blown away by the. I think the Kickstarter kind of blew past 500,000 at one point, which is just bonkers.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I finally I was sitting there going, my dad's like, "Are you getting that money?" No, I'm not getting. But yeah, I mean, it's just been a ton of fun, just working with Devolver, working with Oni. I mean, I really thought it was going to be very kind of prescriptive in terms of how I was going to approach that, but they kind of I mean, obviously within reason, right? But they pretty much just let me kind of go off. Um, you know, I wasn't kind of bound to the kind of, the sort of their own sort of thematic scope. I mean, as I sort of mentioned last time, I was just really interested in this idea of like sacrifice, right? And what
Mhm.
sacrifice means. So I sort of thought I'd sort of lean really heavily into that using, this sort of roguelike where you've got like a lamb running around with an axe. Why not? But yeah, that's wrapping up. And I got to sign a bunch of them real soon. So, I'm looking forward to sort of having my arm in a sling for a couple of weeks afterwards because there were quite a few backers. So yeah.
And do you have any shows that you're going to be attending coming up?
Uh, yeah, New York. I mean, I'll just be I'll be floating around. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't table or anything. I'll be kind of floating around, just trying to get hold of uh, stuff that's missing from my collection.
Mm.
Um, that
Well,
tends to be what I do.
we should try. I know it's impossible to kind of hook up and meet in New York, but
Oh, Chad,
we
I'd
should.
love to, man. Like genuinely, let's go on a hunt. I mean, if bin diving is your thing, because I don't get to do it very often, and I don't get to do it in company. And no, I mean, I'd love that.
Yeah.
That's my
Um,
idea of a good time, as you can see.
mhm. So I know you had a couple months ago. You had a backup in Detective Comics. Anything else coming up you can talk about or
Yeah, I've
tease?
got so I mean, there's some stuff I can't tease, but I mean, I think in like 2 weeks or maybe under that now. I've got a one shot coming out as part of Absolute Power. This the Task Force
Mhm.
seven issue miniseries, which is sort of running alongside Absolute Power, which is basically kind of a part of DC's sort of big summer crossover. And my story is basically I mean, I can't go too deep into the
No, no,
paint,
I
I
don't
don't
want
think,
to.
but
Does it
it's
involve robots
focused on
again?
yeah, but it's focused on Barry Allen,
Okay.
who I was fortunate enough to write last year. Cy Spurrier has been kind of very generous in terms of you know uh, when where he's sort of actively kind of pushed for me to sort of do some sort of work with the sort of Flash characters and everything,
Mhm.
and he's very at least in the last year or so, he's sort of ring fenced Barry Allen for me a little bit, which has just been really nice and very extremely generous of him. He's such a lovely guy. And this one, I think, it's issue 5 of 7, but each one of them sort of acts as a kind of one shot with sort of bridging
Yep.
narratives. And I think I don't know how much I can say, but like
No,
I
don't.
really hope people pick it up because Pete Woods, I mean, who is a master anyway, has done just a heart-stoppingly beautiful job with
Mhm.
the art. I mean, I cannot tell you. I mean, the acting. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful book, and I say that with no ego because I have nothing to do with it. But I can also say, I mean, in terms of the story that I wrote, like I wanted to do something quite sort of weirdly kind of emotionally resonant, I guess. And
Mhm.
because Mark Wade is just a dude, he just enthusiastically kind of went for it and went, "Yep, do that." And I mean, that was an incredible moment. Like I got to have a Zoom with Mark Wade, who I've like worshipped since I was a kid. And yeah, just pitched it kind of in the room as it were, and it was like, "Yep, do that." So I think that one might kind of. I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel incredibly proud of that book. Task Force 7 issue 5. I'm incredible. Get all of them. You've got Dan Waters one in there. They're all
Mhm.
great. But I'm very, very proud of that one.
All right. Well, Sentinels ships in October, and the Infinity comic is currently running. How is it a certain number of issue run that you're doing, or just kind of
Uh,
ongoing until they say
Sentinels is a 5 issue mini.
right?
And that's going to be a kind of complete sort of satisfying story, but obviously it's going to it will have sort of implications outside of itself because the whole sort of From the Ashes line I think is being very kind of delicately curated by Tom Brevoort. He's very, very, like, he's great. Like, I mean, Tom absolutely kind of encourages us to kind of come up with the wildest ideas, but also he's very much kind of got a vision for the line. So like everything
Mhm.
matters, right? Nothing's redundant. But it's also kind of modular in that sense that it's a complete story in and of itself. You can read it; it'll give you a very satisfying meal, but it will obviously have sort of implications sort of outside of that. And yeah, I'm on unlimited and until they decide I'm not. But I'm having a lot of fun, so I hope that's
Yeah.
not for a while.
Well, it definitely looks like you're having a lot of fun, especially playing in the X-Men sandbox.
Oh, I mean, look, I mean, it's man, I mean, I genuinely can't kind of tell you what it means to me, right? Like, I mean, when I was little, I mean, I sort of started reading the sort of the sort of early Lee issues when I was a really little kid. But even before that, right? I mean, I was in hospital for a bunch of stuff, and the first thing my dad brought me, when I kind of came around from anesthesia, was like a stack of like Claremont Cochrane, Claremont Byrne issues. And like from that point, man, like that's just always been the dream. And in terms of how I actually got the gig, I remember I uh it's just a nice thing. I knew they were going to be relaunching the book. I knew they were going to be relaunching the line, and I'd made I'd done a little bit of stuff and I really wanted to have a book in the kind of Krakoan era, like a print book in the Krakoan era. And then like I felt like, oh man, like my moment's passed. Like I've never talked to Tom. I have no idea. I've done some stuff at Marvel. I have no idea if he was aware of my work or not. And my buddy Christian Ward, I was on the phone. I was super bummed. I was like, oh, they're relaunching the line. Like there goes my shot. That's it, right? And he went, just email Tom. You've worked for Marvel. You have a relationship with them. Just email Tom. I said, I can't cold email Tom Brevoort. That's nuts. He went, just try it. Just try it. You're in the door. You have every right to go ahead, do it. So I did, and it was really kind of halting and really kind of nervous and everything. And he got back to me within a day and was just, it wasn't, he didn't like offer me a gig. He was like, thank you very much. We'll kind of keep it in mind, but your enthusiasm is noted. And then at New York last year, Darren Shan just went like, let's go for a coffee. And went for a coffee with him, had no idea what it was about. And I was kind of sat there. He said, do you want to do an X book? And then sort of started outlining it. And I was super excited. And then at one point, I'll never, as he just looks at me, he goes, I think you're a bit excited about this, aren't you? I said, oh yeah, like how can you tell? Am I being kind of super nervous? He went, no, but your legs jiggling. So apparently I was so kind of I was so kind of hyped that like yeah, I just had like a jiggly knee. So, yeah,
Well,
a bit
it's
giddy.
been a pleasure. Been a pleasure chatting with you, and you
Likewise.
know we'll definitely have to meet up and go through some back issue boxes in New York,
Oh, come on, heaven. Let's do that.
and again, Sentinels is out in October. It's 5 issues. Everybody should check it out. Uh, I think we here at Comic Watch are really loving the From the Ashes era, even though I think a lot of our writers are kind of lamenting the Krakoan era also. So,
It-
but
we're all trying to be as absolutely as I know even within the kind of group, like everyone loves those books. The current writers love the Krakoan era books.
Mhm,
The so like everyone wants to kind of everyone wants to address it respectfully.
mhm.
So yeah, please don't think that there's any kind of There's nothing but reverence for that, for those books at all. I promise you.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure catching up with you and
Likewise,
chatting
thank you
with
so
you.
much.
And if somebody catches this feed before it's Thursday and this evening, we'll be chatting with Ron Mars about the 30th anniversary of Zero Hour. So,
Oh my god. I got dangerous artifacts. You remember that? The
mhm,
dangerous artifacts. I got the Italian edition of that the other day. Because the black and white. Oh my
mhm.
god, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Tell Ron I said hi, by the way. I
All
love that
right,
guy, but not on
I
air
will
because he
do
might
it.
go who. That'd suck. But
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again, and we'll
thank
be
you,
in
Chad.
touch.